I was cutting my 28th birthday cake when my mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "You know, Jessica, you were a mistake I never should have made." The room went silent. My business associates, who had come to celebrate the launch of my consulting firm, suddenly found their plates fascinating. But instead of crying or apologizing like I had done for 28 years, I set down the knife, pulled out my phone, and made the call that would expose the biggest financial fraud my family had ever witnessed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica Chen, and that birthday party became the day I discovered my mother had been stealing from a trust fund my late grandfather had established for my education. Money I never knew existed. Money that should have paid for the MIT degree I earned through scholarships and 60-hour work weeks. Money that could have prevented the decade of financial struggle that nearly broke me. The story began 3 months earlier, but the foundation was laid 28 years ago, when my grandfather, David Chen, a successful architect who immigrated from Taiwan, created what he called his generational investment strategy. He had built a thriving architectural practice in Seattle, specializing in sustainable commercial buildings, and he understood that true wealth was measured not in what you accumulated, but in what you enabled others to achieve. When I was born in 1995, Grandfather David established a trust fund containing $150,000, with instructions that the money be used exclusively for my educational expenses. The fund was designed to grow through conservative investments until I reached college age, at which point it would provide comprehensive support for undergraduate and graduate education. My mother, Linda Chen, was designated as the trustee, responsible for managing the fund and ensuring its proper use for its intended purpose. Grandfather David died when I was 6 years old, but not before spending countless hours teaching me about architecture, engineering, and the mathematical principles that governed both disciplines. He would spread blueprints across his dining room table and explain how buildings were designed to withstand earthquakes, how water systems were engineered to serve entire communities, and how thoughtful design could improve people's daily lives. "Jessica," he would say in his careful English, still accented after 40 years in America, "education is the only inheritance that cannot be stolen, devalued, or lost. Everything else can disappear, but what you learn becomes part of who you are forever." Those conversations shaped my understanding of learning as both personal development and social contribution. Grandfather David had used his architectural training to design community centers, schools, and affordable housing projects that served working-class families throughout Seattle. He saw professional competence as a form of public service, and he expected me to approach education with the same sense of purpose and responsibility. After Grandfather David's death, my mother became increasingly controlling about money, education, and my future plans. She insisted I attend a local community college rather than applying to 4-year universities, claiming that our family could not afford tuition at prestigious schools. When I expressed interest in engineering programs, she discouraged me by pointing out the expense of textbooks, laboratory fees, and extended time required to complete technical degrees. "Jessica, you need to be realistic about our financial situation," Linda would say whenever I mentioned academic goals that seemed ambitious. "We are not wealthy people. We cannot afford for you to pursue expensive dreams when practical careers are available." Throughout high school, I maintained a 4.0 grade point average while working part-time at a local electronics store, saving money for college applications and standardized test fees. I assumed my excellent grades would qualify me for scholarships and financial aid that would make university education affordable despite our family's financial limitations. During my senior year, I was accepted to several engineering programs, including a partial scholarship offer from the University of Washington and admission to MIT with substantial financial aid. When I presented these opportunities to my mother, her response was immediate and emphatic rejection. "Absolutely not. These schools are too expensive, too far away, and too demanding. You will attend Bellevue Community College, live at home, and pursue a practical degree that leads directly to employment. I will not allow you to burden our family with educational debt for some fantasy about becoming an engineer." Quote, "The argument that followed was the first time I directly challenged my mother's authority over my educational choices. I presented detailed financial calculations showing that the MIT financial aid package, combined with work-study opportunities and small loans, would make the program affordable. I had researched career prospects for MIT engineering graduates and demonstrated that the investment in education would provide substantial long-term financial returns. Linda's response was to threaten withdrawal of all family support, including housing, if I pursued educational opportunities without her approval. At 17, facing the choice between defying my mother and abandoning my educational goals, I chose compliance and enrolled at Bellevue Community College. The community college experience was academically unchallenging but financially manageable. I completed an associate degree in engineering technology while working 25 hours per week at the electronics store, maintaining my academic performance while contributing to household expenses. Throughout this period, Linda frequently reminded me that I should be grateful for her practical guidance and financial support. After completing my associate degree, I transferred to the University of Washington, financing my education through a combination of partial scholarships, student loans, and full-time work in the university's engineering laboratory. The academic workload was demanding, but I thrived in an environment that challenged my analytical abilities and encouraged innovative thinking. During my junior year, I applied for and received a competitive internship at Boeing, where I worked on avionics systems for commercial aircraft. The internship provided valuable professional experience and confirmed my interest in aerospace engineering, but it also highlighted the financial struggles that had defined my educational journey. My internship supervisor, Dr. Sarah Martinez, was a MIT alumna who had built a distinguished career in aerospace engineering. During one of our regular mentoring conversations, she reviewed my academic transcript and professional development. "Jessica, your performance has been exceptional, but I notice you took a non-traditional path to engineering: community college, part-time studies, extensive work commitments. What drove those choices?" I explained my family's financial situation and my mother's concerns about educational expenses. Dr. Martinez listened thoughtfully, then asked a question that would prove significant 3 years later. "Did your family explore all available financial aid options?" Many engineering students have access to family resources, scholarships, or trust funds that help support their education. I assured Dr. Martinez that we had explored every available option, that my mother had been thoroughly involved in financial aid applications, and that our family simply lacked resources for expensive educational programs. After completing my undergraduate degree, I was accepted to MIT's graduate program in aerospace engineering, with a research assistantship that covered tuition and provided a modest living stipend. This time, I made the decision unilaterally, informing Linda rather than requesting permission. Her reaction was explosive. "Jessica, you are making a terrible mistake. Graduate school is an expensive waste of time that will leave you with more debt and no better job prospects. You should be working, contributing to the household, and thinking about practical considerations like marriage and family." I moved to Cambridge in 2018 to begin my graduate studies, maintaining minimal contact with Linda while immersing myself in advanced coursework and research. The MIT environment was intellectually stimulating but financially challenging as I supplemented my research assistantship with freelance engineering consulting and weekend work at a local technology company. Despite the demanding schedule, I completed my master's degree in aerospace engineering in 2020 with a 3.9 grade point average and a thesis on sustainable propulsion systems that attracted attention from both academic and industry researchers. Several aerospace companies offered positions, but I decided to establish an independent consulting practice specializing in sustainable engineering solutions for small and medium-sized businesses. The decision to launch my own business was driven by observations I had made during internships and graduate research. Many smaller companies needed engineering expertise but could not afford full-time specialized employees. By providing consulting services, I could help these businesses implement sustainable practices while building a diversified client base that would provide both financial stability and professional satisfaction. The consulting business grew steadily through 2021 and 2022 as I developed a reputation for solving complex technical problems while maintaining sensitivity to clients, budget constraints, and operational limitations. My engineering background, combined with business skills I had developed through necessity, allowed me to communicate effectively with both technical teams and executive leadership. By early 2023, the business was generating sufficient revenue to support a comfortable lifestyle while contributing to meaningful projects that aligned with my values around sustainability, and community development. I had achieved the professional success that grandfather David had envisioned, despite the financial obstacles that had complicated my educational journey. The success felt somewhat hollow, however, because of the ongoing tension with Linda and my persistent questions about whether different choices might have made the path less difficult. I had succeeded despite my circumstances rather than because of family support, and I wondered what might have been possible with different financial and emotional resources during my educational development. These questions became more pressing as I prepared for my 28th birthday in March 2023. I had decided to host a celebration that would combine personal milestone recognition with business networking, inviting clients, professional contacts, and a few close friends to mark both my birthday and the consulting firm's continued growth. Linda had not been invited to previous professional gatherings, but I decided to extend an invitation for my birthday celebration as a gesture toward family reconciliation. Despite our disagreements about educational and career choices, she remained my mother, and I hoped that my professional success might create opportunities for improved understanding between us. Her acceptance of the invitation surprised me, as did her request to contribute homemade desserts for the celebration. I interpreted these gestures as evidence that Linda was genuinely interested in supporting my professional achievements and rebuilding our relationship on more positive foundations. The birthday celebration was held at my apartment in downtown Seattle, a space I had chosen specifically for its views of the city skyline and its proximity to the business district where many of my clients were located. The guest list included 12 people, 6 clients, 3 professional colleagues, 2 close friends, and Linda. The evening proceeded smoothly for the first 2 hours, with productive conversations about sustainability consulting, upcoming projects, and industry trends. Linda participated appropriately in social interactions, asking thoughtful questions about my business and expressing apparent pride in my professional accomplishments. The cake ceremony was scheduled as the evening's concluding event, designed to provide a natural transition for guests who needed to leave early while allowing others to continue informal networking. I had prepared brief remarks thanking everyone for their support and outlining my goals for the consulting firm's continued development. As I stood before the group holding the cake knife, preparing to make my remarks, Linda suddenly requested everyone's attention for what she called a mother's perspective on Jessica's journey. Her tone was warm, and her initial comments were appropriately complimentary, acknowledging my academic achievements and professional success while expressing maternal pride in my accomplishments. The guests responded positively, and I felt gratified by what appeared to be public recognition from Linda of the path I had chosen despite her earlier objections. Then her tone shifted, becoming more reflective and ultimately critical. Of course, Jessica's success has come at a cost to our family relationship. She has always been stubborn, always convinced she knew better than the people who loved her most. She insisted on pursuing expensive education despite our financial limitations, accumulated unnecessary debt for degrees that practical experience could have provided, and moved across the country rather than contributing to our household. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The room grew uncomfortable as Linda's comments became increasingly personal and inappropriate for a professional gathering. I attempted to redirect the conversation, but Linda continued speaking with increasing intensity. I suppose I bear some responsibility for Jessica's choices. After all, she was not exactly planned. David and I were not married when I became pregnant, and we were barely managing our own expenses when she was born. Perhaps if I had made different choices then, Jessica would have learned to be more practical about money and family obligations. The room fell silent as the implications of Linda's comments became clear to everyone present. She had essentially announced to my professional associates that I was an unplanned pregnancy and that my existence had created financial strain for my parents. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Linda delivered her final observation. "You know, Jessica, you were a mistake I never should have made." At that moment, standing in my own apartment surrounded by people whose professional respect I had worked years to earn, listening to my mother publicly characterize my birth as a regrettable error, I experienced a clarity that had eluded me throughout our relationship. The hurt, shame, and humiliation I would normally have felt were overshadowed by a sudden understanding that Linda's behavior represented a pattern of financial and emotional manipulation that had shaped my entire adult development. her discouragement of my educational goals, her insistence on practical limitations, and her resentment of my professional success all reflected a fundamental unwillingness to support my development as an independent, successful adult. More importantly, I realized that Linda's reference to financial limitations during my childhood and education might not have been entirely accurate. Grandfather David had been financially successful, and he had specifically expressed commitment to supporting my educational development. The discrepancy between his values and Linda's behavior suggested possibilities I had never considered. Instead of responding emotionally to Linda's public humiliation, I set down the cake knife, retrieved my phone from the kitchen counter, and dialed a number I had not called in several years. Wilson, Kim and Associates answered the receptionist at the law firm that had handled Grandfather David's estate planning. "This is Jessica Chen, David Chen's granddaughter. I need to speak with someone about a trust fund that may have been established for my education. I believe there may have been unauthorized access to assets that should have been available for my educational expenses." The room remained silent as I completed the call and scheduled an appointment for the following morning. When I hung up, I looked directly at Linda, who had gone pale during my conversation with the law firm. "Mother, I think it's time we had an honest conversation about Grandfather's educational trust fund and what happened to the money he left for my college expenses." Linda's expression shifted from surprise to panic, as she realized that her public attack on my character had prompted me to investigate financial matters that she had apparently hoped would remain concealed indefinitely. The birthday celebration ended abruptly, as guests recognized that a serious family confrontation was developing. Within 30 minutes, everyone had departed, leaving Linda and me alone in my apartment with the untouched cake and the knowledge that 28 years of family dynamics were about to be fundamentally reevaluated. As I cleaned up after the party, Linda sat quietly on my couch, apparently understanding that explanations would be required and that the balance of power in our relationship had shifted permanently. The phone call I made that evening would ultimately reveal that Grandfather David's trust fund had grown to $340,000 by the time I reached college age. Money that Linda had systematically withdrawn and spent on personal expenses while convincing me that our family lacked resources for my educational development. The mistake she had made was not my birth, but her decision to steal my inheritance while sabotaging my understanding of my own potential and worth. Correcting that mistake would require legal action, family confrontation, and ultimately the establishment of boundaries that would protect me from further manipulation while holding Linda accountable for decades of financial betrayal. The birthday party that began as a celebration of professional achievement had become the catalyst for discovering the truth about my family's finances and my mother's systematic deception. The transformation would reshape not only my understanding of the past, but my approach to family relationships and financial planning for the future. The morning after my birthday confrontation, I sat in the downtown Seattle office of Wilson, Kim and Associates at exactly 9 o'clock, holding a manila folder containing every document related to my educational journey. The folder held transcripts from 3 institutions, financial aid records, loan documentation and scholarship letters that painted a picture of academic excellence achieved through relentless personal sacrifice and financial constraint. Patricia Wilson, the senior partner who had handled Grandfather David's estate planning, was 72 years old, with silver hair pulled into a precise chignon and eyes that missed nothing during professional conversations. She had practiced estate law for 45 years, specializing in complex trust arrangements and family financial planning for Seattle's Asian American business community. "Ms. Chen, I remember your grandfather very well," Patricia began, settling behind her mahogany desk with a thick file labeled, "David Chen Educational Trust, Jessica Chen Beneficiary. He was exceptionally thorough in his planning and very specific about his intentions regarding your educational support." Patricia opened the file and withdrew documents that I had never seen before. The first was a detailed trust agreement dated September 15, 1995, establishing the David Chen Educational Trust with an initial funding of $150,000, specifically designated for my educational expenses from kindergarten through graduate school. The trust was structured to provide comprehensive educational support, Patricia explained, pointing to specific clauses in the agreement. Elementary and secondary school expenses, college tuition and fees, graduate school funding, educational materials, and even study abroad opportunities if they contributed to your academic development. I stared at the document, trying to reconcile this generous provision with the financial limitations that had defined my entire educational experience. Throughout elementary and high school, Linda had consistently claimed that private school, tutoring, and enrichment programs were unaffordable luxuries that our family could not consider. The trust was also designed to grow through conservative investments, Patricia continued, producing quarterly statements that showed steady appreciation over 27 years. Your grandfather selected a portfolio of blue-chip stocks, government bonds, and education-focused mutual funds that would provide stability while generating sufficient returns to keep pace with educational inflation. The investment statements revealed a trust that had grown from $150,000 in 1995 to $340,000 by 2013, exactly when I had been making college decisions under the assumption that our family lacked resources for university education. The irony was devastating and infuriating simultaneously. Patricia's next revelation was even more disturbing. She produced withdrawal records showing that Linda had begun accessing trust funds in 2009, initially taking small amounts for what she claimed were educational expenses, but progressively increasing the withdrawals until she was systematically depleting the account. Between 2009 and 2020, Linda Chen withdrew a total of $278,000 from the trust, Patricia said, her professional tone unable to mask her disapproval. The withdrawals were supposed to be supported by documentation showing educational expenses, but many of the claimed expenses appear to be fraudulent or inflated. I examined the withdrawal documentation, discovering that Linda had submitted receipts for educational expenses that I knew were fabricated. She had claimed tuition payments to institutions I had never attended, textbook purchases for subjects I had never studied, and educational travel expenses for trips that had never occurred. What should have been available for your educational expenses was systematically diverted to personal use, Patricia explained. Based on these records, Linda Chen used trust money for mortgage payments, credit card debt, personal travel, and luxury purchases that had no connection to educational purposes. The scope of the betrayal was overwhelming. While I had worked multiple jobs to pay for community college, Linda had been using my inheritance to finance her lifestyle. While I had taken out student loans for university expenses, she had been spending money specifically set aside for my education. While I had lived in shared apartments and survived on ramen noodles during graduate school, she had been depleting funds that should have made my educational journey comfortable and debt-free. Patricia, what legal options do I have? I asked, struggling to maintain professional composure while processing the magnitude of Linda's deception. The situation represents clear breach of fiduciary duty and potential criminal fraud, Patricia replied. As trustee, Linda Chen had legal obligations to use trust assets exclusively for their designated purposes. Her systematic diversion of funds to personal use violates both civil and criminal law. Patricia explained that recovering the misappropriated funds would require litigation against Linda, including detailed forensic accounting to trace how the money had been spent and asset recovery to reclaim whatever remained of the stolen inheritance. The process would be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally challenging. But Patricia believed the evidence was sufficient to support successful recovery action. More importantly, Patricia added, your grandfather included specific provisions in his will, expressing his educational philosophy and expectations for your development. He wanted you to understand why he considered education such a crucial investment in your future. Patricia handed me a sealed envelope labeled for Jessica Chen to be opened when she begins her educational journey. The envelope had been in Patricia's files for 28 years, waiting for the moment when I would learn about the trust and understand Grandfather David's intentions. Inside the envelope was a letter written in Grandfather David's careful handwriting, dated 1 month before his death in 2001. The letter began with an explanation of his own educational journey and the obstacles he had overcome to establish his architectural practice in America. My dear granddaughter Jessica, the letter began, by the time you read this letter, you will be old enough to understand why education represents the most valuable inheritance I can provide for your future development. The letter continued with Grandfather David's personal history, describing his arrival in America in 1962, with an engineering degree from Taiwan but no professional connections, limited English skills, and no understanding of American business practices. He had worked construction jobs for 3 years while studying for American professional licensing examinations and improving his English through night classes and library study. Education was not something that happened to me in classrooms, he wrote. Education was something I pursued actively every day through reading, observation, questioning, and practice. The degree from Taiwan gave me technical knowledge, but real education came from applying that knowledge to solve problems, create value, and serve communities. Grandfather David's architectural practice had grown from a one-person office in 1966 to a firm employing 15 people by 1990, specializing in sustainable commercial design and community development projects. His success had enabled him to provide comprehensive educational support for his 3 children, all of whom had completed professional degrees and established successful careers. Your father completed medical school and became a surgeon because education made it possible, the letter continued. Your aunts became teachers and social workers because education opened those pathways for service and contribution. I established this trust fund because I want you to have even greater opportunities than I could provide for my own children. The letter explained that Grandfather David had specifically chosen educational investment over other forms of inheritance because he believed that knowledge, skills, and credentials could never be lost, stolen, or devalued by economic circumstances. Property could be sold, businesses could fail, and financial investments could lose value, but education became a permanent part of personal identity and capacity. When you achieve academic and professional success, you will have the ability to create opportunities not just for yourself but for others who need mentorship, guidance, and support, he wrote. Education multiplies its value by enabling educated people to contribute to the development of their communities and the advancement of knowledge itself. Grandfather David's letter concluded with specific expectations for how I should approach educational opportunities made possible by the trust fund. He wanted me to pursue academic excellence not as personal achievement but as preparation for meaningful contribution to society. He expected me to use my education to solve problems, create value, and help others achieve their own educational and professional goals. Jessica, I will not live to see your graduation ceremonies or celebrate your professional achievements, the letter concluded. But I have complete confidence that you will use your educational opportunities to build something meaningful and lasting. The money in this trust represents my investment in your future, but more importantly, it represents my belief in your potential to make the world better through your knowledge, skills, and service. Reading Grandfather David's letter in Patricia Wilson's office, 22 years after his death and 1 day after discovering Linda's systematic theft of my inheritance, I understood for the first time the full scope of what had been stolen from me. Linda had not just taken money, she had stolen my grandfather's vision for my development and his carefully planned investment in my potential. The emotional impact was overwhelming, but it was accompanied by a crystallizing understanding of what needed to happen next. Patricia Wilson had provided clear evidence of Linda's financial fraud and legal options for recovery. Grandfather David's letter had provided moral framework and historical context that transformed my anger into determination for justice and systemic change. Patricia, I want to pursue full legal action for recovery of the stolen funds, I said. But I also want to understand how to prevent this kind of betrayal from happening to other families. What systemic changes would make this kind of trustee fraud more difficult? Patricia's response revealed her extensive experience with similar cases involving family financial betrayal. She explained that trustee fraud was unfortunately common, particularly in families where one person controlled financial information while other family members remained uninformed about available resources. The most effective prevention is transparency and independent oversight, she said. Trusts should include provisions for regular reporting to beneficiaries, independent financial review, and clear consequences for fiduciary violations. Your grandfather's trust included some protective measures, but not enough to prevent determined fraud by a trusted family member. Patricia recommended immediate forensic accounting to trace Linda's use of the stolen funds, formal demand for repayment before initiating litigation, and coordination with criminal prosecutors if the evidence supported fraud charges. The process would likely take 18 to 24 months to complete, but Patricia believed substantial recovery was possible. Ms. Chen, I want you to understand that your grandfather would be proud of your academic and professional achievements, despite the obstacles created by Linda's betrayal, Patricia said as our meeting concluded. You succeeded without the advantages he tried to provide, which demonstrates exactly the kind of determination and character he hoped to nurture through educational investment. Driving back to my apartment after the meeting with Patricia Wilson, I reflected on the profound implications of what I had learned. The trust fund discovery reframed my entire understanding of my educational journey, my relationship with Linda, and my professional responsibilities going forward. I had always attributed my academic struggles to family financial limitations and Linda's practical concerns about educational expenses. Now I understood that the limitations were artificial, created by Linda's systematic theft rather than genuine resource constraints. My achievements felt both more significant and more tragic. More significant because I had succeeded despite deliberate sabotage, more tragic because the struggle had been unnecessary. The discovery also clarified Linda's behavior patterns throughout my educational development. Her discouragement of ambitious academic goals, her insistence on local and affordable programs, her resentment of my eventual success, all of these responses made sense if she had been stealing money specifically designated for my educational advancement. Supporting my academic achievement would have required her to account for how she was spending my inheritance. Most importantly, Grandfather David's letter provided clear direction for how I should approach the legal and family confrontation ahead. This was not just about recovering stolen money or punishing Linda for her betrayal. This was about honoring the educational philosophy and community contribution that Grandfather David had envisioned when he established the trust. That evening, I created a detailed action plan that would guide my response to Linda's financial fraud. The plan included legal action for fund recovery, personal boundaries to prevent further manipulation, and professional commitments that would honor Grandfather David's vision for how education should contribute to community development. The legal component involved cooperation with Patricia Wilson's forensic accounting investigation, documentation of my actual educational expenses to demonstrate the impact of Linda's theft, and preparation for the difficult family confrontations that would be required during the recovery process. The boundary component required ending financial entanglement with Linda, establishing clear expectations for future family interactions, and protecting myself from the emotional manipulation that had characterized our relationship for 28 years. The professional component involved expanding my consulting practice to include pro bono services for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, establishing mentorship relationships with young people pursuing engineering education, and eventually creating educational opportunities that would honor Grandfather David's belief in education as community investment. 3 days after learning about the trust fund, I received a text message from Linda requesting a private meeting to, quote, discuss our conversation after your birthday party. Quote, the message suggested that she understood the seriousness of my legal investigation and wanted to address the situation before formal litigation began. I agreed to meet Linda at a neutral location, a coffee shop near her apartment that provided privacy for difficult conversations while maintaining public accountability for both participants. The meeting would be our first direct communication since her birthday party attack, and I knew it would determine whether resolution was possible through negotiation or whether court action would be necessary. Linda's betrayal had revealed the foundation of dreams that Grandfather David had built for my education, a foundation systematically undermined by someone who should have been its most dedicated guardian. The next phase would determine whether that foundation could be restored, and whether Linda would face consequences for violating the trust placed in her by both Grandfather David and me. The birthday party confrontation had been the catalyst moment that exposed decades of financial fraud. Now began the process of understanding what had been stolen, what could be recovered, and how to build something better from the ruins of family betrayal. The mistake Linda had made was not my birth, but her decision to steal from someone who had been generous enough to entrust her with my future. Correcting that mistake would require legal action, but more importantly, it would require me to honor the educational vision that Grandfather David had established, and that Linda had tried to destroy. Education had indeed been the inheritance that could not be stolen, but Linda had certainly tried her best to steal the resources that should have made that education accessible, affordable, and transformative. The fight ahead would determine whether justice was possible and whether grandfather David's investment in my future could still achieve its intended purpose of creating positive change in the world. The coffee shop where I met Linda 3 days after the trust fund revelation was deliberately chosen for its public setting and professional atmosphere. I arrived 15 minutes early to secure a corner table that would provide privacy while maintaining visibility to other patrons. The manila folder containing Patricia Wilson's documentation sat beside my laptop, representing both evidence of Linda's betrayal and the foundation for whatever resolution might emerge from this confrontation. Linda entered the coffee shop at exactly the appointed time, her usual punctuality now seeming less like courtesy and more like calculated control. She appeared older than I remembered from the birthday party, her face drawn with tension and her movements lacking the confident authority that had characterized our relationship for 28 years. For the first time in my adult life, I observed Linda approaching me from a position of weakness rather than assumed superiority. She settled across from me without ordering coffee, her hands clasped tightly on the table surface. "Jessica, I think there has been a misunderstanding about your grandfather's financial arrangements. I need to explain some things that you might not fully comprehend about family financial management during difficult periods." Her opening statement revealed the same manipulative approach that had characterized our relationship throughout my educational development. Linda was attempting to reframe her systematic theft as misunderstanding rather than deliberate fraud, positioning herself as the victim of complex circumstances rather than the perpetrator of financial betrayal. "Linda, I met with Patricia Wilson yesterday," I replied, using her first name deliberately to signal the fundamental shift in our relationship dynamic. "I have complete documentation of the Educational Trust Fund, including withdrawal records showing that you systematically stole $278,000 over 11 years while convincing me that our family lacked resources for my education." Linda's expression shifted from calculated contrition to defensive anger. "That money was used for family expenses that benefited everyone, including you. Housing costs, utilities, groceries, medical bills. You lived in that house and benefited from those expenditures. I was managing family resources during economic challenges that you were too young to understand." Her response confirmed Patricia Wilson's assessment that Linda felt entitled to misappropriate trust assets for personal use. Linda appeared to genuinely believe that her role as trustee granted her permission to spend my inheritance on expenses that provided no educational benefit, while actively discouraging the educational pursuits the money was specifically designated to support. "Linda, the trust documentation explicitly restricts fund usage to educational expenses," I said, opening the folder to display quarterly statements and withdrawal records. "You submitted fraudulent receipts claiming educational expenses that never occurred while using the money for mortgage payments and personal travel. This represents systematic financial fraud committed against someone who trusted you to manage assets for their benefit." Linda's defensive posture collapsed as she realized that I possessed detailed evidence of her deception. Her next response revealed the desperation of someone whose carefully constructed justifications had been exposed as inadequate. "Jessica, please understand that I was trying to provide stability for our family during difficult economic periods. Your father left when you were 3 years old, and I was managing everything alone. The money from your grandfather's trust helped maintain the household that supported your development through elementary and high school years." This revelation about my father's departure was new information that Linda had never shared during my childhood or adolescence. Throughout my development, Linda had maintained vague explanations about my father's absence without providing specific details about when or why he had left our family. "What happened to my father?" I asked, recognizing that Linda's financial betrayal might be connected to broader patterns of deception about family history and relationships. Linda's resistance to answering this question suggested that additional family secrets existed beyond the trust fund theft. Her eventual response provided context that reframed my understanding of both her financial desperation and her resentment toward my educational ambitions. "Your father, Michael Chen, was supposed to contribute to family expenses and educational planning, but he disappeared when you were 3 years old," Linda admitted. "He left me with mortgage payments, credit card debt, and responsibility for raising you without any financial support or assistance. The money from your grandfather's trust was the only resource available for maintaining household stability. This information explained Linda's financial pressures but did not justify her decision to steal money specifically designated for my education, while actively discouraging the educational opportunities the money was meant to support. Linda had created a false choice between family stability and educational investment when the trust fund was specifically designed to provide both. More significantly, Linda's revelation about my father's abandonment suggested that her resentment toward my educational achievements might reflect deeper psychological issues related to her own unfulfilled plans and family disappointments. Linda, if you were struggling financially, why did you discourage my educational goals rather than using the trust fund for its intended purpose? I asked. You could have supported my MIT admission with grandfather's money while maintaining household stability through other resources or family assistance. Linda's response to this question revealed the psychological complexity underlying her financial betrayal. Her systematic discouragement of my educational ambitions had not been motivated purely by practical concerns about expenses, but by deeper resentment about opportunities that she had never received and achievements that highlighted her own limitations. Jessica, watching you pursue expensive education while I struggled with basic survival felt like a luxury we could not afford, Linda said. I completed high school and worked immediately to support myself and eventually you. College was never an option for me, and graduate school seemed like an indulgence that practical people could not consider. Linda's admission revealed that her betrayal had been motivated by a combination of financial desperation and psychological resentment. She had stolen my educational inheritance not just to solve immediate financial problems, but to prevent me from achieving educational success that she had never experienced, and that reminded her of her own unrealized potential. This understanding of Linda's motivations did not excuse her behavior, but it explained the systematic nature of her sabotage and the particular cruelty of her birthday party attack. Linda had not just stolen money, she had attempted to destroy my confidence and self-worth because my success represented everything she felt she had been denied by circumstances and choices beyond her control. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of someone I had not expected to see. Dr. Sarah Martinez, my former internship supervisor at Boeing, approached our table with purposeful determination. Jessica, I hope you do not mind the intrusion, but I received a call from Patricia Wilson explaining your situation, Dr. Martinez said. I have information that might be relevant to your family's financial discussion. Quote, Linda looked confused by Dr. Martinez's presence, but I was curious about what information she might possess regarding the trust fund situation. Dr. Martinez settled into a third chair and placed a folder on the table between us. Patricia Wilson contacted me because she discovered that your grandfather had established educational connections beyond the trust fund. David Chen had been providing scholarship support through Boeing's Employee Assistance Program for engineering students from immigrant families. This revelation added another dimension to grandfather David's educational vision that I had not known existed. Dr. Martinez explained that David Chen had contributed substantial amounts to Boeing's educational foundation while I was in elementary and middle school, specifically requesting that scholarships be made available for students whose families might not have traditional resources for engineering education. Your grandfather was particularly interested in supporting students who demonstrated academic excellence despite financial constraints, Dr. Martinez continued. He believed that aerospace engineering needed more practitioners from diverse backgrounds who understood both technical challenges and community impact. Dr. Martinez's folder contained correspondence between grandfather David and Boeing's scholarship committee from 1998 through 2001, revealing his ongoing commitment to educational access for underrepresented students in engineering fields. The letters demonstrated that his vision extended far beyond individual family support to systematic change in educational opportunity. Jessica, your grandfather specifically requested that Boeing identify and support students who showed determination to succeed despite family obstacles, Dr. Martinez said. He wanted to create pathways for young people whose potential might be overlooked due to financial limitations or family circumstances that did not traditionally support higher education. The irony was devastating. While grandfather David had been working to create educational opportunities for students facing family financial constraints, Linda had been systematically undermining his granddaughter's access to the educational resources he had specifically provided for her development. Dr. Martinez turned to address Linda directly. Ms. Chen, I want you to understand that your father-in-law was deeply committed to Jessica's educational development. He spoke frequently about her potential and his expectations for her academic achievement. He would be profoundly disappointed to learn that someone he trusted had sabotaged the educational investment he considered essential for her future. Linda's discomfort with Dr. Martinez's comments was evident, but she seemed unable to respond effectively to criticism from someone who had known Grandfather David personally and understood his educational philosophy. Dr. Martinez continued with information that would prove crucial for the legal proceedings ahead. Patricia Wilson asked me to review Jessica's academic and professional development in the context of what might have been possible with proper financial support. I have prepared a detailed analysis of the educational opportunities that were denied due to artificial financial constraints. The analysis that Dr. Martinez presented documented the compound effects of Linda's betrayal across my entire educational trajectory. The report estimated that proper trust fund usage could have eliminated student loans, enabled full-time study instead of work-study arrangements, provided access to educational travel and research opportunities, and supported graduate education without the financial stress that had characterized my MIT experience. More significantly, Dr. Martinez concluded, the report demonstrates that Jessica achieved exceptional academic and professional success, despite systematic sabotage of her educational resources. Her accomplishments under artificially constrained conditions suggest extraordinary potential that was never fully realized due to unnecessary financial stress and family discouragement. Dr. Martinez's analysis provided evidence that would be essential for calculating damages in the legal proceedings ahead, but it also provided psychological validation that transformed my understanding of my own achievements. I had succeeded not because I was adequately supported, but because I had overcome deliberate obstacles created by someone who should have been facilitating my development. The meeting concluded with Dr. Martinez offering professional testimony for the legal proceedings and ongoing mentorship as I navigated the complex process of recovering stolen assets and rebuilding family relationships on healthier foundations. After Dr. Martinez departed, Linda sat in silence for several minutes before making her final attempt to avoid legal consequences for her actions. Jessica, I understand that you are angry about financial decisions I made during difficult periods, but pursuing legal action will destroy our family relationship permanently, Linda said. I am willing to discuss repayment arrangements if you can find a way to resolve this situation without involving courts and lawyers. Linda's offer to discuss repayment represented acknowledgement of her guilt, but it also revealed her continued belief that she could manipulate the situation to avoid full accountability for her actions. The offer was conditional on my agreement to handle the matter privately, allowing Linda to escape public consequences for her systematic fraud. Linda, any repayment discussion must begin with complete disclosure of how you spent the stolen money and verification that you have assets available for recovery, I replied. Patricia Wilson will coordinate forensic accounting to determine exactly where the money went and what remains available for repayment. Linda's reluctance to agree to complete financial disclosure suggested that her spending of the trust fund money might have been even more problematic than the evidence Patricia Wilson had already discovered. The conversation ended with Linda agreeing to provide financial records to Patricia Wilson while I committed to delaying formal litigation for 30 days to allow investigation of voluntary repayment possibilities. Driving home from the coffee shop meeting, I reflected on the unexpected support that had emerged since my birthday party confrontation with Linda. Patricia Wilson had provided legal expertise and evidence necessary for pursuing justice. Dr. Sarah Martinez had offered professional validation and testified to Grandfather David's educational vision. Both women represented allies I had not known existed, but who understood the significance of educational opportunity and the seriousness of Linda's betrayal. The support network extended beyond professional assistance to emotional validation that reframed my understanding of family relationships and personal achievement. For 28 years, Linda had been my primary source of family identity and the primary interpreter of my potential and worth. Her systematic discouragement had created persistent self-doubt about my abilities and entitlement to ambitious goals. Dr. Martinez's testimony about Grandfather David's educational philosophy and expectations provided alternative family narrative that honored achievement, supported ambition, and valued education as community contribution rather than individual indulgence. This perspective revealed that Linda's limitations were personal rather than universal family characteristics. The discovery of unexpected allies also suggested that my isolation within family relationships had been artificial rather than inevitable. Linda had discouraged my connections with extended family members and professional mentors who might have provided alternative perspectives on education, achievement, and family dynamics. That evening, I received a phone call from my Aunt Catherine Chen Williams, Grandfather David's youngest daughter, who lived in Portland and worked as a high school counselor. Catherine explained that Dr. Martinez had contacted her to discuss Grandfather David's educational trust and Linda's misappropriation of the funds. "Jessica, I want you to know that your grandfather spoke about you constantly during the years before his death," Catherine said. "He was so proud of your academic performance and excited about your educational potential. He specifically told me that he had established financial provisions to ensure that you would have every educational opportunity available." Catherine's call revealed that additional family members existed who supported educational achievement and understood Grandfather David's vision for my development. She offered to provide testimony for the legal proceedings and ongoing family relationship that would not depend on Linda's approval or participation. "Your grandfather would be horrified to learn that Linda sabotaged your educational development while stealing money he provided specifically for your academic success," Catherine continued. "He established that trust fund because he believed education was the most valuable inheritance he could provide, and he trusted Linda to honor his intentions." Catherine's perspective provided family context that Linda had systematically concealed throughout my development. Grandfather David's side of the family valued education, supported academic achievement, and understood the importance of investing in young people's potential for community contribution. The conversation with Catherine also revealed that Linda had isolated me from extended family relationships that might have provided alternative support during my educational struggles. Catherine had assumed that I was receiving appropriate trust fund support and had wondered why I seemed to be struggling financially during college and graduate school. "Jessica, if I had known that Linda was not providing proper educational support, I would have intervened immediately," Catherine said. "Several family members would have been happy to assist with your education if we had understood the situation." The revelation that extended family support had been available but concealed by Linda added another dimension to the betrayal I was processing. Linda had not just stolen my money, she had prevented me from accessing family relationships that could have provided emotional and practical support during my educational development. The phone call with Catherine concluded with her invitation to visit Portland for extended conversation about family history, Grandfather David's educational philosophy, and the legal proceedings ahead. Catherine offered to serve as a liaison with other extended family members who might provide testimony or support for recovery of the stolen trust funds. The third day after my birthday party confrontation had revealed a network of professional and family support that existed beyond Linda's control and manipulation. Patricia Wilson provided legal expertise, drive. Martinez offered professional validation, and Catherine represented family relationships that honored achievement and supported educational goals. These relationships had always existed, but Linda's systematic discouragement and isolation had prevented me from recognizing or accessing the support that was available throughout my educational development. The birthday party crisis had created conditions for discovering allies who understood the value of education and the seriousness of Linda's betrayal. The support network discovery transformed my understanding of the legal battle ahead, from individual confrontation with Linda to community effort to restore justice and honor Grandfather David's educational vision. The mistake Linda had made was not just financial fraud, but the systematic isolation of her daughter from family and professional relationships that could have provided alternative perspectives on achievement, ambition, and self-worth. Correcting Linda's mistake would require not just legal action for fund recovery, but rebuilding connections with supporters who had been excluded from my development and establishing new patterns of family relationship based on honesty, accountability, and mutual respect, rather than manipulation and control. The forensic accounting report arrived at my office on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the coffee shop confrontation with Linda. The document was 147 pages of financial analysis that traced every dollar of the stolen trust fund money through 11 years of systematic fraud. Reading the report felt like archaeological excavation of my own sabotaged potential. each fraudulent transaction representing an opportunity that had been denied, while I struggled through educational challenges that should never have existed. Patricia Wilson had engaged Harrison Financial Investigations, a firm specializing in complex asset recovery cases, to conduct comprehensive analysis of Linda's financial records from 2009 through 2020. The investigation required court orders to access bank statements, credit card records, mortgage documentation, and tax returns that revealed the complete scope of Linda's deception. The forensic analysis revealed patterns of spending that went far beyond basic household expenses or emergency financial management. Linda had used trust fund money for luxury vacations to Europe and Hawaii, premium vehicle purchases, high-end clothing and jewelry, restaurant meals at expensive establishments, and home renovations that increased her property value while providing no educational benefit to me. During the same period when Linda was claiming that our family lacked resources for my university education, the forensic report showed expenditures of $43,000 for personal travel, $37,000 for vehicle purchases, and $28,000 for home improvements. The luxury spending occurred simultaneously with Linda's discouragement of my academic ambitions based on alleged financial constraints. The most damaging revelation in the forensic report was evidence that Linda had deliberately concealed the trust fund's existence from me throughout my educational development. Bank statements showed that she had arranged for all trust-related correspondence to be directed to a post office box that I never knew existed, ensuring that I would remain unaware of the educational resources that were legally designated for my benefit. The investigation also revealed that Linda had consulted with financial advisors about strategies for accessing trust fund money without triggering oversight or accountability measures. Email correspondence showed that she had specifically inquired about methods for withdrawing money from educational trusts for family emergencies while minimizing documentation requirements. These communications demonstrated that Linda's theft was not the result of financial desperation or poor judgment during crisis periods, but calculated fraud executed with full awareness of its illegality and its impact on my educational opportunities. She had actively sought professional advice about how to steal money while avoiding detection or accountability. The psychological impact of absorbing this information was profound and complex. The forensic report provided concrete evidence that Linda had systematically betrayed my trust while sabotaging my educational development. But it also created overwhelming pressure to ensure that legal action achieved appropriate justice for such calculated deception. Reading the forensic analysis, I experienced simultaneous relief and burden. Relief came from understanding that my educational struggles had been caused by deliberate sabotage, rather than personal inadequacy or family financial limitations. The burden came from realizing that multiple people now expected me to pursue legal action that would hold Linda accountable for her systematic fraud, while honoring grandfather David's educational vision. Patricia Wilson had scheduled a meeting for Thursday morning to discuss litigation strategy based on the forensic findings. Dr. Martinez had offered to provide expert testimony about the professional impact of the educational opportunities that Linda's fraud had denied. Aunt Catherine had connected me with additional family members who were prepared to support legal action and testify about grandfather David's educational expectations. The growing network of professional and family support created expectation that I would pursue maximum legal consequences for Linda's betrayal. Everyone who learned about the situation expressed outrage about Linda's calculated theft and encouraged aggressive legal action to recover stolen funds, while ensuring that she faced appropriate criminal prosecution. This expectation felt both validating and overwhelming. The support confirmed that Linda's behavior was objectively unacceptable, and that my response was justified, but it also created pressure to manage legal proceedings effectively, while maintaining professional responsibilities and personal emotional stability. The weight of carrying other people's expectations became particularly intense during conversations with Aunt Catherine, who had begun coordinating extended family response to Linda's fraud. Catherine had contacted grandfather David's other children and grandchildren, all of whom expressed shock about Linda's systematic theft and anger about her sabotage of my educational development. "Jessica, your grandfather would be devastated to learn that someone he trusted had stolen money specifically designated for your education," Catherine said during one of our evening phone conversations. "He established that trust fund because he believed education was the most valuable inheritance he could provide, and he expected the family to honor his intentions even after his death. Catherine's comments reflected genuine concern about honoring grandfather David's memory, but they also created additional pressure to ensure that legal action achieved outcomes that would satisfy extended family expectations for justice and accountability. Similar pressure emerged from professional relationships with colleagues and clients who learned about Linda's fraud through the business networking community. Dr. Martinez had shared information about the situation with other aerospace professionals, many of whom expressed interest in supporting my legal action through testimony, financial contributions, or professional advocacy. Jessica, your achievements despite systematic family sabotage demonstrate exactly the kind of determination and excellence that our industry needs to recognize and support, Dr. Martinez explained during a lunch meeting at her office. Linda's fraud represents an attack on educational opportunity that extends beyond your individual case to broader questions about family support for professional development. Dr. Martinez's perspective transformed the legal proceedings from personal dispute resolution to professional community interest in protecting educational opportunity from family manipulation and financial fraud. This framing provided additional motivation for pursuing comprehensive legal action while creating expectation that the case would serve broader purposes beyond individual asset recovery. The expectation to serve broader purposes was reinforced by conversations with Patricia Wilson about the precedent value of successful prosecution for Linda's systematic fraud. Patricia explained that trustee fraud cases often involve family members who exploited legal and emotional relationships to steal assets while avoiding accountability through manipulation and intimidation. Jessica, successful legal action in your case could establish precedents that make similar fraud more difficult for other families, Patricia said. Educational trusts are particularly vulnerable to trustee abuse because beneficiaries are often minors or young adults who lack financial sophistication to recognize systematic theft. Patricia's comments suggested that my legal action could contribute to protecting other families from similar betrayal, but they also created expectation that I would pursue the case with sufficient rigor to establish meaningful legal precedents, rather than settling for convenient private resolution. The cumulative effect of these various expectations was psychological pressure that sometimes felt overwhelming despite the validation and support they represented. Everyone who learned about Linda's fraud expressed confidence in my ability to handle the legal proceedings effectively while maintaining professional success and personal, emotional stability. This confidence was flattering but also burdensome, because it assumed capabilities and emotional resilience that I was still developing while processing the trauma of discovering systematic family betrayal. The expectation that I would manage complex legal proceedings while honoring multiple stakeholders' interests created responsibility that extended far beyond my personal recovery from Linda's fraud. The pressure became particularly intense when I received a letter from the Seattle Asian Business Association requesting permission to publicize my case as an example of successful response to family financial manipulation. The organization wanted to use my experience as educational material for workshops about protecting family assets and supporting educational development within immigrant communities. Ms. Chen, your case represents important lessons about trustee accountability and family financial planning that could benefit many other families in our community. The letter stated, "We would like to feature your experience in our upcoming conference about intergenerational wealth transfer and educational investment strategies." The request to publicize my experience represented recognition of the broader significance of Linda's fraud and my response to it, but it also created expectation that I would be comfortable sharing personal family trauma for community educational purposes. The decision about publicity would require balancing my privacy interests against potential community benefit from increased awareness about trustee fraud. Similar requests arrived from Patricia Wilson's law firm about sharing case information with other attorneys handling trustee fraud litigation, from Dr. Martinez's professional network about presenting my experience at aerospace industry conferences, and from Aunt Catherine about discussing the situation at extended family gatherings that I had not attended for several years. Each request represented legitimate interest in learning from my experience or supporting similar legal action, but the cumulative effect was expectation that I would be willing to discuss Linda's betrayal and my response publicly, while managing ongoing legal proceedings and maintaining professional responsibilities. The psychological complexity of managing these expectations while processing my own emotional response to Linda's fraud became apparent during individual therapy sessions that I began attending 3 weeks after the birthday party confrontation. Dr. Rebecca Torres, a psychologist specializing in family trauma and financial abuse, helped me understand the normal emotional responses to discovering systematic betrayal by trusted family members. Jessica, the pressure you are feeling to manage everyone else's expectations about your legal response is common among people who discover family financial fraud, Dr. Torres explained during our second session. Family members, friends, and professional colleagues often project their own anger about betrayal onto the victim, creating expectation that legal action will provide emotional satisfaction that may not be realistic. Dr. Torres helped me understand that managing other people's expectations about my response to Linda's fraud was separate from determining what legal action would best serve my own interests and emotional healing. The support and encouragement from family and professional contacts was valuable, but it should not dictate decisions about litigation strategy or personal boundary establishment. Your primary responsibility is to yourself and your own recovery from systematic manipulation and financial abuse, Dr. Torres continued. Legal action should serve your interests in justice, asset recovery, and protection from future manipulation. The fact that other people want to see Linda punished or want your case to serve broader purposes does not obligate you to pursue legal strategies that might not be optimal for your personal situation. Dr. Torres's perspective provided crucial framework for evaluating the various expectations that different stakeholders had expressed about my response to Linda's fraud. The therapy sessions helped me distinguish between support that honored my autonomy and pressure that attempted to direct my decisions according to other people's priorities. This distinction became particularly important when Linda contacted me directly through email to request another private meeting before formal litigation began. Linda's email suggested that she was prepared to discuss comprehensive financial restitution if we could avoid court proceedings that would create public record of her fraud. Jessica, I understand that you are angry about financial decisions I made during difficult periods, but I want you to consider the impact that public legal action will have on our extended family and professional relationships, Linda wrote. I am prepared to discuss full repayment of trust fund money if we can resolve this matter privately through mediation rather than litigation. Linda's offer represented potential resolution of the financial aspects of her fraud, but it also represented an attempt to avoid public accountability for her systematic deception. The decision about whether to accept private settlement or pursue public legal action would require balancing multiple considerations, including asset recovery, personal justice, family relationships, and broader community impact. The various expectations from family members, professional colleagues, and community organizations created pressure to reject Linda's settlement offer and pursue maximum legal consequences, regardless of the personal cost or likelihood of superior outcome. The expectation was that public prosecution would provide greater satisfaction and serve broader purposes than private financial resolution. However, Dr. Torres's therapy sessions helped me understand that the decision about settlement versus litigation should be based primarily on my own assessment of what resolution would best serve my long-term interests in justice, financial recovery, and emotional healing. Other people's expectations about punishment or precedent setting were secondary considerations that should inform, but not dictate, my decision-making process. The therapy sessions also addressed the psychological impact of discovering that my educational achievements had been accomplished despite systematic sabotage rather than with appropriate family support. Dr. Torres helped me understand that recognizing the obstacles I had overcome could increase rather than decrease my sense of personal competence and resilience. Jessica, the forensic accounting report demonstrates that you achieved exceptional academic and professional success while facing deliberate family sabotage that would have defeated many other people, Dr. Torres observed. Your achievements are more remarkable, not less remarkable, because they were accomplished despite systematic attempts to undermine your development. This perspective helped transform my understanding of the educational struggles I had experienced, from evidence of personal inadequacy to evidence of extraordinary determination and capability. The realization that I had succeeded despite deliberate sabotage provided confidence that I could handle the legal proceedings effectively while maintaining professional responsibilities and personal emotional stability. The therapy sessions also addressed the responsibility I felt to honor grandfather David's educational vision through my response to Linda's fraud. Dr. Torres helped me understand that the most meaningful way to honor grandfather David's intentions was to pursue the resolution that would best enable my continued professional development and contribution to community well-being. Your grandfather established the trust fund because he wanted to support your educational and professional development, Dr. Torres explained. The most important way to honor his intentions is to ensure that your response to Linda's fraud serves your continued growth and success rather than satisfying other people's expectations about punishment or legal precedent. This framework provided clarity about how to balance the various expectations that different stakeholders had expressed about my response to Linda's betrayal. The primary consideration should be what resolution would best enable me to continue the educational and professional development that grandfather David had envisioned when he established the trust fund. The weight of carrying other people's dreams and expectations was significant, but it was also manageable when approached with clear understanding of my own priorities and values. The support from family, professional colleagues, and community members represented valuable resources that could enhance my ability to pursue appropriate legal action while maintaining personal and professional stability. The expectation that I would handle the situation effectively was both pressure and validation, reflecting confidence in capabilities that I had demonstrated through years of academic and professional achievement despite systematic family obstacles. The responsibility to serve broader purposes through my legal response was meaningful, but secondary to ensuring that my own interests in justice, financial recovery, and continued development were appropriately protected. The forensic accounting report had revealed the full scope of Linda's systematic fraud, creating foundation for legal action that could achieve comprehensive justice while serving as precedent for protecting other families from similar betrayal. The decision about how to proceed would require balancing personal interests with community impact, while honoring the educational vision that grandfather David had established and that Linda had attempted to destroy. The mediation proposal arrived in my office via certified mail on Friday afternoon, 3 days after Linda's settlement offer and 1 day before Patricia Wilson's scheduled meeting about litigation strategy. The formal document, prepared by Linda's attorney Robert Sinclair, proposed comprehensive financial restitution in exchange for signed agreement that I would not pursue criminal prosecution or civil litigation regarding the trust fund matter. The mediation proposal represented Linda's most serious attempt to avoid public accountability for her systematic fraud. The document outlined specific terms for repayment that appeared, at first examination, to address the financial aspects of her betrayal, while protecting her from criminal prosecution and public record of her deception. According to the proposal, Linda would repay the complete amount of stolen trust fund money, calculated at $412,000, including accumulated interest and investment returns, that the fund should have generated during the period of her theft. The repayment would occur through monthly installments over 5 years, secured by second mortgage on Linda's residence, and monitored by neutral third-party financial administrator. The proposal also included provisions for my attorney fees and costs associated with the forensic investigation, acknowledging Linda's responsibility for expenses that her fraud had made necessary. Additionally, Linda agreed to provide complete financial disclosure to ensure that asset concealment had not occurred and that repayment capacity was accurately assessed. The mediation terms appeared financially comprehensive, addressing not only the stolen principal amount but also the opportunity cost of investment returns that proper trust management should have generated. The proposed timeline for repayment was reasonable given Linda's income and assets, and the security provisions would protect against default or additional financial manipulation. However, the proposal's central requirement was my agreement to forego criminal prosecution and to maintain confidentiality about Linda's systematic fraud. The mediation would occur through private dispute resolution process that would create no public record of Linda's deception or consequences for her calculated betrayal of fiduciary duty. Reading the mediation proposal in my office late Friday afternoon, I experienced conflicting emotions that reflected the complexity of choosing between financial recovery and public accountability. The settlement offered practical resolution of the financial damage Linda had inflicted, while avoiding the uncertainty, expense, and emotional stress of extended litigation. Simultaneously, accepting the mediation proposal would allow Linda to escape public consequences for systematic fraud that had sabotaged my educational development while enriching her personal lifestyle. The confidentiality requirements would prevent other families from learning about patterns of trustee abuse that might help protect them from similar betrayal. The decision about mediation versus litigation represented the first major obstacle in my pursuit of justice for Linda's betrayal. The choice would determine not only the practical resolution of financial issues, but also the precedent for accountability when trusted family members systematically abuse their fiduciary responsibilities. Saturday morning, I met with Patricia Wilson to review the mediation proposal and discuss strategic considerations for choosing between private settlement and public legal action. Patricia's law office was located in a converted historical building in downtown Seattle, and her conference room overlooked Elliott Bay with views that provided perspective appropriate for major decision-making. Jessica, the mediation proposal represents a serious offer that addresses the financial aspects of Linda's fraud comprehensively. Patricia began, spreading the settlement documents across the polished conference table. The repayment amount includes accumulated interest and investment returns. The timeline is realistic given Linda's assets, and the security provisions would protect against default. Patricia's analysis confirmed my assessment that the mediation proposal offered substantial financial recovery without the risks associated with litigation. Court proceedings could take 2 to 3 years to complete, with uncertain outcomes despite strong evidence of Linda's systematic fraud. Successful litigation might ultimately recover similar financial amounts while requiring significantly more time, expense, and emotional energy. However, accepting mediation means that Linda avoids criminal prosecution for what appears to be systematic financial fraud committed over 11 years, Patricia continued. The confidentiality provisions would prevent other families from learning about her deception and prevent establishment of legal precedent that might deter similar trustee abuse. Patricia explained that trustee fraud cases often involved family members who exploited legal and emotional relationships to steal assets while avoiding accountability through manipulation and intimidation. Successful prosecution could establish precedents that would make similar fraud more difficult and provide law enforcement with tools for addressing financial abuse within families. The decision between mediation and litigation ultimately depends on your priorities regarding financial recovery versus public accountability, Patricia concluded. Both approaches have advantages and disadvantages that you must weigh according to your own values and long-term objectives. Patricia's analysis provided clear framework for evaluating the mediation proposal, but it did not resolve the fundamental tension between practical resolution and principled accountability. The decision would require balancing my personal interests in financial recovery against broader community interests in deterring similar fraud. Sunday afternoon, I visited Aunt Catherine in Portland to discuss the mediation proposal with extended family members who had expressed strong opinions about appropriate response to Linda's betrayal. Catherine had arranged a gathering that included grandfather David's other children and several grandchildren, all of whom had been following developments in the trust fund case. The family meeting occurred at Catherine's house, a comfortable residence filled with photographs documenting 3 generations of academic and professional achievements that reflected grandfather David's educational values. The assembled relatives represented successful careers in medicine, education, engineering, and business, all of whom understood the importance of educational opportunity and the seriousness of Linda's systematic sabotage. Jessica, we want you to understand that our entire family supports whatever decision you make about pursuing legal action against Linda, Catherine began, addressing the group gathered in her living room. However, we also want you to consider the broader implications of allowing systematic trustee fraud to be resolved through private settlement without public accountability. The family discussion revealed unanimous anger about Linda's betrayal and strong preference for criminal prosecution that would establish public consequences for her systematic deception. Several family members argued that accepting mediation would encourage similar fraud by demonstrating that trustee abuse could be resolved through financial restitution without criminal prosecution or professional consequences. Linda's fraud represents an attack on educational opportunity that extends beyond your individual case to fundamental questions about family responsibility for supporting younger generations, said Dr. Michael Chen, grandfather David's eldest son and a practicing physician in San Francisco. Allowing her to escape public accountability sends message that educational sabotage is acceptable if the perpetrator can afford financial restitution. Dr. Chen's perspective reflected the views of most family members present, who viewed Linda's fraud as violation of fundamental family values regarding educational support and intergenerational investment. The consensus was that mediation would provide inadequate deterrent effect and fail to honor grandfather David's educational vision appropriately. Your grandfather established educational resources not just for your individual benefit, but as expression of family commitment to supporting academic achievement across generations, added Professor Sarah Chen Martinez, who taught education policy at Oregon State University. Linda's systematic theft violated that commitment and should face consequences that reflect the seriousness of betraying educational trust. The family meeting provided clear guidance about extended family expectations regarding my response to Linda's fraud. The unanimous preference for criminal prosecution reflected genuine commitment to educational values and legitimate concern about precedent effects of private settlement. However, the intensity of family opinion also created pressure that complicated my decision-making process. Following the family meeting, I drove back to Seattle with clearer understanding of stakeholder perspectives, but continued uncertainty about the optimal approach to resolving Linda's fraud. The mediation proposal offered practical advantages that litigation could not guarantee, while criminal prosecution would serve broader purposes that private settlement would not achieve. Monday morning, I met with Dr. Martinez to discuss the professional implications of choosing mediation versus litigation for Linda's systematic fraud. Dr. Martinez had offered to provide expert testimony for criminal prosecution and had expressed interest in using my case to educate other families about protecting educational resources from trustee abuse. Jessica, the aerospace industry has seen several cases of employees whose professional development was sabotaged by family members who resented educational achievement or diverted resources intended for career advancement. Dr. Martinez explained during our meeting at Boeing's facilities. Linda's systematic fraud represents patterns of family financial abuse that affect multiple industries and professional communities. Dr. Martinez's perspective emphasized the broader professional significance of Linda's fraud and the potential value of establishing legal precedent through criminal prosecution. The aerospace community had particular interest in protecting educational pathways because technical careers required substantial educational investment that could be vulnerable to family financial manipulation. Your achievements, despite systematic family sabotage, demonstrate exceptional determination that our industry needs to recognize and support, Dr. Martinez continued. However, accepting private settlement might prevent other families from learning about patterns of educational sabotage that could help them protect their own resources and development opportunities. Dr. Martinez's analysis reinforced family and community expectations for criminal prosecution while acknowledging my autonomy in making the final decision about legal strategy. Her perspective emphasized that my case could contribute to broader understanding of family financial abuse and provide educational value for other families facing similar challenges. The meeting with Dr. Martinez was followed by consultation with Dr. Torres, who provided psychological perspective on the decision between mediation and litigation. Dr. Torres helped me examine the emotional factors that complicated the decision-making process and identify criteria that would serve my long-term interests in healing and personal development. Jessica, the decision between private settlement and public litigation should be based primarily on what resolution would best support your emotional recovery from systematic family betrayal, Dr. Torres explained during our Thursday session. Both approaches have psychological advantages and disadvantages that you should consider alongside practical and financial considerations. Dr. Torres pointed out that mediation would provide faster resolution and eliminate uncertainty associated with criminal prosecution, potentially reducing ongoing stress and allowing focus on professional development and family relationship rebuilding. However, private settlement might also create persistent questions about whether justice had been adequately served and whether Linda had faced appropriate consequences for her systematic deception. Public litigation would provide formal recognition that Linda's behavior was unacceptable and ensure that she faces consequences proportional to her systematic fraud drive. Torres continued. However, criminal prosecution would also require extended engagement with legal proceedings that might interfere with your professional responsibilities and emotional healing process. Dr. Torres helped me understand that both mediation and litigation involved psychological trade-offs that required careful evaluation according to my personal values and long-term objectives. The decision should serve my interests in justice, financial recovery, and emotional stability while considering but not being dictated by other people's expectations about appropriate punishment. The psychological analysis provided crucial framework for evaluating the mediation proposal according to criteria that extended beyond financial recovery or public accountability to include personal healing and professional development considerations. Dr. Torres encouraged me to trust my own judgment about what resolution would best serve my comprehensive interests. Friday morning, I received unexpected communication that would significantly influence my decision about Linda's mediation proposal. Detective Maria Santos from the Seattle Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit contacted me to discuss potential criminal investigation of Linda's systematic fraud, based on information that Patricia Wilson had provided to law enforcement authorities. Ms. Chen, the evidence of systematic trustee fraud in your case appears to meet standards for criminal prosecution under Washington state financial abuse statutes. Detective Santos explained during our phone conversation. We would like to discuss whether you would be willing to cooperate with criminal investigation that could result in formal charges against Linda Chen. Detective Santos explained that criminal prosecution would occur independently of civil litigation or mediation, meaning that Linda could face criminal consequences regardless of whether we reached private financial settlement. This information fundamentally changed the strategic calculation about mediation versus litigation by separating criminal accountability from civil financial recovery. The criminal investigation would focus on Linda's systematic violation of fiduciary duty and fraudulent use of trust assets over 11 years. Detective Santos continued. If charges are filed and prosecution is successful, Linda would face potential prison time, criminal fines, and permanent criminal record that would reflect the seriousness of her systematic fraud. The criminal investigation possibility provided pathway for achieving public accountability without requiring me to pursue civil litigation that might be more expensive and uncertain than private mediation. I could potentially accept Linda's settlement offer for financial recovery while supporting criminal prosecution that would establish appropriate consequences for her systematic deception. This development resolved the central tension between practical financial resolution and principled public accountability that had complicated my evaluation of Linda's mediation proposal. Criminal prosecution would serve broader community interests in deterring trustee fraud, while mediation could serve my personal interests in financial recovery and relationship resolution. Saturday morning, I made the decision to accept Linda's mediation proposal for civil financial settlement while supporting Detective Santos's criminal investigation for public accountability. The approach would maximize both financial recovery and criminal consequences while minimizing the uncertainty and expense of extended civil litigation. The decision represented strategic resolution of competing priorities that had created the first major obstacle in my pursuit of justice for Linda's systematic fraud. By separating criminal prosecution from civil settlement, I could achieve comprehensive accountability without requiring extended legal proceedings that might interfere with professional responsibilities and personal healing. The choice to pursue both mediation and criminal prosecution demonstrated that obstacles often require creative solutions that transcend apparent either-or alternatives. The initial framing of mediation versus litigation had created false choice between practical resolution and principled accountability, when actual optimal approach involved pursuing both objectives through different legal mechanisms. Linda's attempt to avoid public accountability through comprehensive financial settlement had created obstacle that required careful analysis of competing values and strategic options. The resolution honored my interests in financial recovery, while serving broader community interests in criminal consequences for systematic trustee fraud. The first major obstacle had tested my ability to balance personal interests with community expectations, while maintaining focus on long-term objectives that extended beyond immediate resolution of Linda's betrayal. The decision-making process had required consultation with multiple advisors and stakeholders, while ultimately trusting my own judgment about what approach would best serve comprehensive interests in justice, financial recovery, and continued personal development. Overcoming this obstacle had demonstrated capabilities for strategic thinking and principled decision-making that would prove essential for navigating subsequent challenges in the legal proceedings ahead. The experience had also clarified my values regarding accountability, family relationships, and community responsibility in ways that would guide future decisions about professional development and service opportunities. The mediation proposal had represented Linda's most serious attempt to control the consequences of her systematic fraud, But her miscalculation was assuming that financial restitution alone could resolve the comprehensive damage she had inflicted. The decision to pursue both civil settlement and criminal prosecution ensured that all aspects of her betrayal would face appropriate consequences while serving my interests in comprehensive justice and recovery. The mediation conference room at Cascade Dispute Resolution contained a circular table designed to minimize adversarial positioning during settlement negotiations. However, the careful architectural psychology could not eliminate the fundamental tension between Linda's attempt to minimize consequences for her systematic fraud and my determination to achieve comprehensive accountability through parallel criminal prosecution. Margaret Sullivan, the neutral mediator selected to facilitate our negotiations, possessed 32 years of experience resolving complex family financial disputes. Her preliminary case review had identified the trust fund matter as involving sophisticated patterns of fiduciary abuse that required careful analysis of both financial damages and appropriate restitution mechanisms. This mediation will address civil financial resolution while criminal investigation proceeds independently through appropriate law enforcement channels, Margaret explained during her opening remarks on the first Tuesday morning in May. The participant should understand that successful civil settlement does not preclude criminal prosecution for systematic violations of fiduciary duty. Linda's attorney Robert Sinclair had advised her that mediation offered the most favorable pathway for resolving civil liability while minimizing additional legal exposure. However, Linda appeared to have difficulty comprehending that financial restitution would not eliminate potential criminal consequences for 11 years of calculated fraud. The mediation process required detailed financial analysis that revealed the complete scope of Linda's systematic theft while establishing appropriate restitution amounts. Patricia Wilson had prepared comprehensive documentation, demonstrating not only the principal amounts stolen, but also the compound impact of denying educational opportunities that should have been available throughout my academic development. The trust fund would have reached $643,000 by 2023 under proper investment management, Patricia explained, presenting actuarial analysis prepared by Harrison Financial Investigations. Linda's systematic withdrawals eliminated not only principal amounts but also investment returns that conservative portfolio management should have generated over 14 years. The financial analysis revealed damages that extended beyond simple theft to encompass opportunity costs that proper trust management would have provided. Educational expenses that I had financed through student loans, work-study arrangements, and personal sacrifice could have been covered entirely by trust fund resources if Linda had fulfilled her fiduciary obligations appropriately. Linda's response to the financial analysis demonstrated continued difficulty accepting full responsibility for the comprehensive damage her systematic fraud had inflicted. She maintained that some trust fund withdrawals had provided indirect educational benefit by supporting household stability during my developmental years. Jessica lived in our family home throughout elementary and high school, benefiting from mortgage payments, utility expenses, and household maintenance that trust fund money helped support. Linda argued through her attorney. The educational trust should be understood as contributing to overall family financial stability that provided secure environment for Jessica's academic development. Linda's attempted justification revealed the same manipulative reasoning that had characterized her systematic fraud throughout 11 years of theft. She was attempting to reframe personal luxury expenditures as family support, while claiming that stealing money specifically designated for educational purposes had somehow served educational objectives. Margaret Sullivan's mediation experience enabled her to recognize Linda's manipulation while maintaining professional neutrality appropriate for dispute resolution. Her questioning strategy exposed the flawed logic underlying Linda's justification, while encouraging focus on factual financial analysis rather than emotional manipulation. Ms. Chen, the forensic accounting report indicates luxury travel expenditures totaling $43,000 during periods when Jessica was financing her education through student loans and part-time employment, Margaret observed. Can you explain how personal vacation expenses serve the educational purposes for which the trust fund was established? Linda's inability to provide coherent explanation for luxury spending while claiming financial hardship demonstrated the calculated nature of her systematic fraud. The mediation process was revealing patterns of deliberate deception rather than emergency financial management during family crisis periods. The learning curve for managing complex mediation while supporting criminal investigation required developing skills in strategic communication that I had not previously needed during my engineering consulting practice. Legal proceedings demanded precision in language and careful consideration of how statements might be interpreted in multiple contexts. Patricia Wilson provided guidance about maintaining consistency between mediation discussions and criminal investigation cooperation, while avoiding statements that might compromise either proceeding. The parallel processes required careful coordination to ensure that civil settlement negotiations did not interfere with law enforcement investigation. Jessica, mediation statements are generally confidential and cannot be used in criminal proceedings, Patricia explained during our preparation sessions. However, you should maintain consistent factual positions across both processes to avoid creating confusion or appearing unreliable to either mediator or investigators. The complexity of managing dual legal processes while maintaining professional consulting responsibilities required developing enhanced organizational and time management capabilities. Each proceeding involved extensive documentation, scheduled meetings, and strategic decision-making that demanded careful attention while avoiding interference with client services. Detective Santos's criminal investigation progressed simultaneously with mediation discussions, requiring separate meetings and document production that provided law enforcement with evidence necessary for potential prosecution. The detective's questions focused on establishing criminal intent and systematic patterns of fraud that would support felony charges under Washington state financial abuse statutes. Ms. Chen, the evidence suggests that Linda's fraud involved deliberate concealment of trust fund resources while actively discouraging your educational pursuits. Detective Santos observed during one of our investigation interviews, this pattern indicates calculated intent to steal assets while preventing detection through systematic manipulation of your understanding about available resources. The criminal investigation required providing detailed testimony about Linda's discouragement of my educational goals, while she was simultaneously stealing money designated for educational support. This testimony established the psychological manipulation component of Linda's fraud that extended beyond simple financial theft to encompass educational sabotage. The investigation also required analysis of communications between Linda and financial institutions that demonstrated her knowledge of legal restrictions governing trust fund usage. Email correspondence showed that Linda had specifically inquired about methods for accessing educational trust money while avoiding accountability measures designed to protect beneficiary interests. These communications provided evidence of criminal intent that distinguished Linda's systematic fraud from emergency financial management during family hardship. The criminal investigation was building a comprehensive case for prosecution based on deliberate violation of fiduciary duty rather than misguided financial decisions during crisis periods. The mediation process required learning advanced negotiation techniques for achieving optimal financial recovery while maintaining strategic position for criminal prosecution. Margaret Sullivan's guidance helped develop understanding of how settlement terms could be structured to serve multiple objectives simultaneously. Successful mediation requires identifying underlying interests rather than focusing exclusively on initial positions. Margaret explained during one of our private consultation sessions. Linda's underlying interest is minimizing total consequences for her fraud, while your underlying interest is achieving comprehensive accountability through both financial recovery and criminal prosecution. This analysis helped identify settlement terms that could serve my comprehensive interests, while providing Linda with manageable restitution schedule that acknowledged her financial capacity limitations. The optimal approach involves structured payments secured by appropriate collateral, rather than requiring immediate lump sum payment that might exceed Linda's liquid assets. The mediation discussions also addressed non-financial terms that would prevent future manipulation and establish clear boundaries for ongoing family relationships. These provisions included requirements for financial transparency, restrictions on future communication patterns, and acknowledgement of responsibility that could not be retracted or minimized in subsequent interactions. Any settlement agreement should include Linda's written acknowledgement of systematic fraud and acceptance of full responsibility for financial and educational damage inflicted through her betrayal. I specified during mediation discussions, I will not accept resolution that allows Linda to maintain public facade of innocent financial management during family hardship. This requirement created significant tension within mediation discussions because Linda preferred settlement terms that would minimize public acknowledgement of systematic fraud. Her attorney argued that comprehensive responsibility acknowledgement exceeded reasonable settlement requirements and could complicate criminal defense strategy. However, my insistence on full responsibility acknowledgement reflected understanding that Linda's manipulation had involved not only financial theft but systematic undermining of my self-confidence and understanding of my own potential. Settlement terms needed to address psychological manipulation as well as financial damages. The mediation process revealed additional learning opportunities about forensic financial analysis and asset recovery strategies that provided valuable professional development beyond the immediate trust fund matter. The experience enhanced my understanding of complex financial investigations and dispute resolution techniques that could benefit my consulting practice. Patricia Wilson encouraged my engagement with technical aspects of forensic accounting and legal strategy development as educational opportunity that could inform future professional service delivery. The trust fund case involved sophisticated financial analysis techniques that had applications for business consulting and strategic planning services. Jessica, your analytical capabilities and attention to detail have been exceptional throughout this complex legal matter, Patricia observed during one of our strategy sessions. The skills you are developing through managing mediation and criminal investigation could enhance your consulting practice and potentially create opportunities for expert witness work in other financial abuse cases. The suggestion that my experience with Linda's fraud could contribute to helping other families facing similar betrayal provided meaningful framework for understanding the broader purpose of pursuing comprehensive accountability. The learning curve involved not only managing immediate legal proceedings but developing capabilities that could serve community interests in preventing trustee fraud. The criminal investigation reached significant milestone during the third week of mediation, when Detective Santos informed me that the prosecutor's office had approved felony charges against Linda for systematic violation of fiduciary duty and fraudulent conversion of trust assets. The evidence supports charges that carry potential prison sentence of 18 to 36 months plus criminal fines and restitution orders, Detective Santos explained during our phone conversation. Linda will be formally charged next week regardless of mediation outcome, ensuring that criminal accountability proceeds independently of civil settlement. This development provided crucial leverage for mediation discussions by demonstrating that Linda would face criminal consequences regardless of civil settlement terms. The criminal charges eliminated Linda's primary motivation for seeking comprehensive settlement that would avoid all legal accountability. The mediation sessions following criminal charge approval produced rapid progress toward financial settlement, as Linda recognized that criminal prosecution would proceed regardless of civil resolution. Her negotiating position shifted from attempting to avoid accountability toward minimizing total financial and legal consequences through reasonable civil settlement. Linda has agreed to comprehensive financial restitution totaling $643,000, including accumulated investment returns, attorney fees, and investigation costs. Margaret Sullivan announced during our final mediation session in late May. The payment schedule provides for monthly installments over 60 months secured by second mortgage on Linda's residence. The settlement agreement also included non-financial terms that established clear boundaries for future family interactions, required complete financial disclosure to prevent asset concealment, and included written acknowledgement of Linda's systematic fraud and responsibility for educational damage inflicted through her betrayal. The settlement provides comprehensive civil resolution while preserving criminal prosecution that will establish appropriate public consequences for systematic trustee fraud. Patricia Wilson confirmed following successful mediation completion. This represents optimal outcome that serves both personal financial recovery and broader community interests in deterring similar family financial abuse. The mediation's success demonstrated that complex legal challenges could be resolved through strategic approach that honored multiple interests simultaneously. The learning curve had required developing advanced negotiation skills while maintaining focus on comprehensive accountability rather than accepting convenient partial resolution. The experience had also provided valuable professional development in financial analysis, legal strategy, and dispute resolution that enhanced my consulting capabilities while serving broader community purposes. The skills developed through managing Linda's fraud case could contribute to helping other families protect educational resources from trustee abuse. Most importantly, the mediation process had demonstrated that systematic preparation and strategic thinking, could overcome sophisticated attempts at manipulation and control. Linda's calculated fraud had been exposed and addressed through comprehensive legal response that honored both practical financial recovery and principled accountability requirements. The learning curve associated with managing complex legal proceedings while maintaining professional responsibilities had required developing enhanced organizational skills and strategic thinking capabilities that would prove valuable throughout my career. The experience had transformed challenging personal crisis into opportunity for professional growth and community contribution. The mistake Linda had made was underestimating my capacity for learning and applying complex legal strategies while maintaining focus on comprehensive accountability rather than convenient settlement. Her systematic fraud had created conditions for developing capabilities that would serve both personal advancement and community protection against similar financial abuse. The formal criminal charges against Linda were filed on June 2, triggering a cascade of consequences that extended far beyond the legal proceedings themselves. Within 48 hours of the charges becoming public record, my extended family relationships began fracturing along lines that revealed fundamental disagreements about accountability, family loyalty, and the appropriate response to systematic financial betrayal. The first indication of family division came through a phone call from my cousin Marcus Chen, Dr. Michael Chen's eldest son, who worked as a financial advisor in San Francisco. Marcus had been among the family members most supportive of criminal prosecution during our Portland gathering, but his perspective changed dramatically when Linda faced actual felony charges. "Jessica, I understand your anger about the trust fund situation, but criminal charges seem excessive for what amounts to family financial management during difficult periods," Marcus said during our Wednesday evening conversation. "Linda made mistakes, but she is still our family member, and criminal prosecution will destroy her reputation and financial stability permanently." Marcus's reversal reflected a pattern that would emerge throughout the extended family, as the abstract principle of accountability collided with the practical reality of criminal prosecution. Family members who had expressed strong support for holding Linda responsible began reconsidering their positions when faced with the concrete consequences of felony charges. The criminal charges could result in prison time and permanent criminal record that will affect Linda's employment and housing opportunities for the rest of her life, Marcus continued. "Are you certain that such severe consequences are appropriate for financial decisions that were motivated by family survival rather than personal enrichment?" Quote, Marcus's questions forced me to examine whether my pursuit of criminal accountability reflected appropriate justice or excessive punishment driven by anger about Linda's systematic deception. The conversation revealed the psychological complexity of maintaining commitment to principled accountability when family members characterize such commitment as vindictive overreach. The family division intensified when Linda's sister, Patricia Chen Rodriguez, contacted other relatives to organize intervention aimed at convincing me to request dismissal of criminal charges. Patricia had not been involved in previous family discussions about the trust fund situation, but became actively engaged when criminal prosecution threatened Linda's long-term stability. "Jessica, your mother made serious errors in judgment, but criminal prosecution will punish not only Linda, but also innocent family members who depend on her financial and emotional support," Patricia argued during a conference call that included several relatives. "We are asking you to consider family forgiveness rather than legal vengeance as the appropriate response to Linda's mistakes." The characterization of criminal prosecution as legal vengeance, rather than appropriate accountability, created additional pressure to reconsider the path I had chosen. Patricia's intervention strategy involved reframing Linda's systematic fraud as errors in judgment, while positioning my support for criminal prosecution as motivated by vindictiveness rather than principled commitment to justice. The family pressure campaign reached its peak when Dr. Michael Chen, who had been among the strongest advocates for criminal prosecution, requested a private meeting to discuss, quote, family reconciliation alternatives that would avoid the permanent consequences of felony conviction. "Jessica, I want you to understand that supporting criminal prosecution was appropriate when we viewed the situation abstractly," Dr. Chen explained during our Saturday morning coffee meeting. However, the reality of potential prison time and permanent criminal record requires us to consider whether family healing might be better served through private accountability rather than public punishment. Dr. Chen's reversal was particularly challenging because his initial support had provided crucial validation for my decision to pursue comprehensive legal action. His change of position suggested that my judgment about appropriate consequences for Linda's fraud might be flawed, or that my commitment to accountability might reflect emotional dysfunction rather than principled decision-making. The family pressure to abandon criminal prosecution intensified when Linda's attorney informed Detective Santos that Linda was prepared to plead guilty to reduced misdemeanor charges in exchange for my written request that felony charges be dismissed. This plea arrangement would eliminate prison time while creating criminal record that acknowledged wrongdoing without imposing severe long-term consequences. Ms. Chen, Linda's attorney, has presented a plea proposal that would result in misdemeanor conviction, criminal fines, community service, and supervised restitution rather than felony charges that could result in prison time. Detective Santos explained during our phone conversation. The prosecutor is willing to consider reduced charges if you support this resolution. The plea arrangement represented compromise that could provide criminal accountability without the severe consequences that had triggered family opposition to prosecution. However, accepting misdemeanor charges would also minimize the seriousness of Linda's systematic fraud and potentially establish inadequate precedent for deterring similar trustee abuse. The decision about supporting reduced charges required weighing family reconciliation interests against community protection objectives, while considering the psychological impact of accepting resolution that might inadequately reflect the scope of Linda's betrayal. Simultaneously with family relationship challenges, the criminal prosecution was creating professional complications that threatened my consulting business stability and client relationships. Several clients had learned about the legal proceedings through business networking channels and expressed concern about potential disruption to project delivery schedules. Jessica, we understand that family legal matters require attention, but we need assurance that ongoing litigation will not interfere with project completion timelines or quality standards, explained David Park, project manager for my largest aerospace consulting contract. The criminal prosecution involves court appearances and testimony that could conflict with critical project milestones. David's concerns reflected legitimate business considerations about reliable service delivery during extended legal proceedings. The criminal prosecution would require multiple court appearances, testimony preparation, and coordination with prosecutors that could interfere with professional responsibilities and client service standards. The professional challenges were compounded when two prospective clients withdrew from contract discussions after learning about the criminal case through industry networking. The withdrawn contracts represented substantial lost revenue that would affect my ability to maintain business operations while managing legal proceedings. We have decided to engage alternative consulting services for this project due to concerns about potential disruption from your ongoing legal matters, one client explained in their withdrawal notification. We wish you success in resolving your family situation and hope to consider your services for future projects when circumstances permit. The client withdrawals created financial pressure that complicated my ability to maintain the comprehensive legal strategy that had proven successful during mediation proceedings. Reduced consulting income would limit resources available for ongoing legal expenses while potentially forcing acceptance of less favorable resolution to minimize business disruption. The professional impact extended beyond immediate client relationships to broader reputation effects within the aerospace consulting community. Industry colleagues who had previously expressed support for my response to Linda's fraud began distancing themselves as the criminal prosecution created ongoing visibility and potential controversy. Jessica, while we admire your commitment to family accountability, the extended legal proceedings are creating uncertainty about your availability for major projects. Dr. Martinez explained during a difficult conversation about my participation in upcoming Boeing initiatives. We may need to consider alternative consultants for projects that require guaranteed availability during critical development phases. Dr. Martinez's concerns reflected practical business considerations rather than disapproval of my legal strategy, but the effect was similar reduction in professional opportunities that would persist throughout the duration of criminal proceedings. The personal sacrifices extended beyond family and professional relationships to encompass social connections and community involvement that had provided emotional support during previous challenges. Friends who had initially expressed strong support for holding Linda accountable began avoiding social interaction. As the legal proceedings continued without clear resolution timeline, the situation with your mother has become so complex and emotionally charged that social gatherings feel uncomfortable when the topic arises, explained Jennifer Walsh, a close friend who had been supportive throughout my educational development. We care about you and want to help, but the legal drama is affecting group dynamics and making social events difficult to enjoy. Jennifer's withdrawal reflected broader social isolation that accompanied extended legal proceedings involving family conflict. Friends who wanted to remain supportive found themselves in an uncomfortable position of discussing ongoing litigation while maintaining relationships with mutual acquaintances who knew Linda through community connections. The social isolation was particularly challenging because it eliminated informal support systems that had provided emotional balance during previous difficult periods. The criminal prosecution required managing complex legal strategy while processing psychological trauma of family betrayal, without access to normal social outlets for stress management and emotional processing. The cumulative effect of family pressure, professional complications, and social isolation created persistent stress that affected sleep patterns, concentration, and physical health throughout the summer months following criminal charge filing. Dr. Torres provided guidance about managing stress during extended legal proceedings, while maintaining perspective about long-term objectives. Jessica, the sacrifices you are experiencing represent normal consequences of pursuing principled accountability in situations involving systematic family betrayal, Dr. Torres observed during one of our sessions. The pressure from family members and professional colleagues reflects their discomfort with confronting difficult truths about financial abuse rather than problems with your decision-making. Dr. Torres helped me understand that the sacrifices associated with criminal prosecution were temporary costs that would be outweighed by long-term benefits of establishing appropriate accountability for Linda's systematic fraud. The family pressure and professional complications would eventually resolve, while the psychological benefit of comprehensive justice would provide permanent foundation for healthy relationship patterns. The people who are pressuring you to abandon criminal prosecution are prioritizing short-term comfort over long-term justice and healing. Dr. Torres continued, supporting reduced charges might provide immediate relief from family conflict, but it could create persistent questions about whether adequate accountability was achieved. The therapy sessions provided crucial framework for evaluating sacrifice costs against accountability benefits while maintaining focus on comprehensive resolution rather than convenient compromise. Dr. Torres encouraged strategic thinking about long-term consequences rather than reaction to immediate pressure from family and professional associates. The most significant personal sacrifice became evident during July when I realized that pursuing comprehensive legal action required postponing professional goals that had been central to my career development planning. The extended legal proceedings would prevent acceptance of consulting opportunities that required substantial time commitment or travel that might conflict with court schedules. The criminal prosecution timeline suggests that resolution will require 8 to 12 months, including plea negotiations or trial proceedings, Patricia Wilson explained during our strategy review session. You should plan for ongoing legal commitments that may interfere with major professional opportunities during this period. Patricia's timeline assessment required difficult decisions about delaying business expansion plans that had been developed before the trust fund discovery. The legal proceedings would consume resources and attention that had been designated for professional development initiatives that could enhance long-term consulting practice growth. However, the professional delays were balanced by unexpected opportunities for legal and business skill development that enhanced consulting capabilities while serving justice objectives. The experience managing complex litigation while maintaining client relationships provided valuable expertise in crisis management and strategic communication that could benefit future business development. Your ability to manage sophisticated legal proceedings while maintaining professional service quality demonstrates exceptional organizational and strategic thinking capabilities, Patricia observed. The skills you are developing through this experience could create new consulting opportunities in areas involving complex financial analysis and dispute resolution. The recognition that legal proceedings provided valuable professional development helped reframe sacrifices as investments in enhanced capabilities rather than pure costs, without compensating benefits. The experience was developing expertise in areas that could expand consulting service offerings while contributing to community protection against similar financial abuse. The sacrifice inventory also revealed unexpected resilience and capability for managing complex challenges without compromising core values or long-term objectives. The ability to maintain commitment to comprehensive accountability despite significant family, professional, and social pressure demonstrated psychological strength that had developed through years of overcoming educational and career obstacles. Most importantly, the sacrifices associated with pursuing criminal prosecution were voluntary choices made in service of principled accountability rather than consequences imposed by circumstances beyond my control. The distinction between chosen sacrifice and imposed hardship provided psychological framework that maintained agency and purpose throughout difficult periods. By August, the sacrifice inventory included strained family relationships with extended relatives who preferred private resolution, reduced professional opportunities during legal proceedings, social isolation from friends uncomfortable with ongoing litigation, financial costs associated with legal expenses, and delayed business development plans requiring substantial time commitment. However, the inventory also included unexpected benefits involving enhanced legal and business skills, validated psychological resilience, professional recognition for managing complex challenges effectively, and growing reputation within legal community for principled response to family financial abuse. The most significant realization from conducting comprehensive sacrifice analysis was understanding that maintaining commitment to appropriate accountability required accepting temporary costs that would be outweighed by long-term benefits of comprehensive justice and precedent establishment for protecting other families from similar betrayal. The mistake Linda had made was assuming that family pressure and professional complications would convince me to abandon criminal prosecution in favor of convenient private resolution. Her calculation failed to account for psychological strength developed through years of succeeding, despite systematic sabotage and commitment to principles that transcended immediate comfort or convenience. The sacrifices associated with correcting Linda's biggest mistake were substantial but manageable when viewed as temporary costs necessary for achieving comprehensive accountability that would provide permanent foundation for healthy family relationships and community protection against trustee fraud. The inventory revealed that principled action requires accepting significant personal costs while maintaining focus on objectives that extend beyond immediate convenience toward lasting justice and positive change. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.